Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome dear students in this class of BS English. Your course title is Semantics. Course code is ENGL4140. This is your course instructor Tayyiba. Students, today we will discuss the topic of communication. That's very helpful for semantics, just to understand the basic concepts of semantics. Because language itself, it is a system of science that is related with semiotics also. So the agenda of today's presentation includes that what is communication, then we will discuss a simple model of communication. And as you know that language, it is a system of science. So we will discuss some basic concepts that are related to semiotics, including iconicity. Then we will discuss conventionality. The next one is discreteness. And after that, we will discuss language and other communicative channels. We will also discuss the characteristics of linguistic science that includes simple and complex science. Then we will move towards various approaches to the study of meaning, including, you can say, psychology and philosophy, neurology, semiotics, and linguistics. So students, this is the agenda of our today's presentation. Let's start our session that is related to communication. Meaning makes a little sense except in the context of communication. The notion of communication, students, it provides as good a place as any to start an exploration of meaning or an investigation of meaning. And if we talk about communication, we can say communication, it can be conceived very broadly, in a very broad sense, including within its scope, such as we can talk about the transfer of information between biological generations via genetic codes. Then we can talk about the interaction between people, the interaction between a driver and his car. And indeed, we can talk about any sort of stimulus response situation. However, in our today's session, we will confine ourselves to what is surely the paradigm that is called communicative scenario. And in this communicative scenario, we'll talk about the transfer of information between human beings. Okay, now look at the figure that is there in the slide. In this model, students, the whole process, it begins with a speaker. Because a speaker has something to communicate. The speaker wants to say something. And what is that something? That is called message. And when we talk about messages, messages in their initial form, they cannot be transmitted directly because they, you can say, need to be converted. They need to be converted into a form that can be transmitted. And that form is called signals. So the messages, they need to be converted into signals. And when we talk about ordinary conversations, this involves a process. And that process is called linguistic encoding. Now maybe you people have a question that what's meant by linguistic encoding. Students, the linguistic encoding, it means translating the message into a linguistic form and then translating that linguistic form into a set of instructions. In a set of instructions to the speech organs, which when executed result in an acoustic signal. So we can say the initial form of this signal, it may be termed as transmitted signal, as you people can see in this figure. First the message is there, then encoding, and after that there is a transmitted signal. Now we'll talk about a channel. You can say every mode of communication. Every mode of communication has a channel. And then what is the benefit of that channel? Because through which the signal travels for speech. And we have the auditory channel for normal writing, and then sign language, the visual channel. And there might be so other, we can talk about even the tactile and so on. As the signal students travels from sender to receiver, it alters in various ways. There might be distortion, again interference from irrelevant stimuli, or loss to maybe you can say fading. So these changes are referred. A collective term is used for all these, that is called noise. And as a result, when the signal is picked up by the receiver, or you can say the received signal is never precisely the same as the transmitted signal. We can say if every detail of the transmitted signal it was crucial for the message being transmitted, communication would be, you can say, it would be a chancy business. And for effective communicating system, like we can talk about language. Language compensate for this loss of information by building a degree of redundancy into the signals. And essentially this means that the information in a signal is given more than once. Or you can say, or is at least, or partially predictable from other parts of a signal. So we can say that the entire message, it can be reconstructed even if there is a significant loss. And this is said about the language, that language roughly it is 5% redundant. Okay, we can say if the signal or the signals has been received by the other person or by the receiver, then what is the next procedure? Students, the next procedure is decoding. It means that the signals has to be decoded in order to retrieve the original message. And if we talk about the ideal situation or the ideal cases, the message reconstructed by the receiver would be similar, would be identical to the message that the speaker started out with. And almost certainly this rarely, if ever, happens. However, we may presume that in the majority of the cases, it is close enough. Students, it is worth mentioning here that the meaning, it has three aspects. So, number one is called speaker's meaning. Now, what is meant by speaker's meaning? It is indicating towards speaker's intended message. What does the speaker want to convey? Number two is hearer's meaning. Hearer's meaning, it is pointing out towards hearer's or receiver's inward message. How he will interpret the message that is conveyed by the speaker. Number three is sign meaning. Sign meaning can be taken to be the sum of the properties of the signal which make it or more apt than other signals for conveying speaker's intended message, or we can say more apt for conveying some message or some messages than others. And in the case of an established signaling system, that we can quote the example of language, the meanings of the signs are not under the control of the users. Because students, the signs are the property of the speech community, and these signs, they have their fixed meanings. And of course, on any, we can say, specific event or occasion, or any particular occasion, the signs used may be ad hoc or conventional, and if ad hoc, they may be pre-arranged, or you can say they may be spontaneous. Language is a system of signs, and any natural human language is a complex sign system. And students, this complex sign system, it is designed to ensure infinite expressive capacity, and that is to say there is nothing that is thinkable which cannot in principle be encoded. And each elementary sign, it is, or you can say it has a symbolic association. So there is a symbolic association between a meaning and a form. And form, you can say it is a phonetic form or graphic form. And all these elementary signs, they may combine together in a rule governed way. And why all these are combined together? To form more complex signs. And if there will be more complex signs, correspondingly we will say that the meanings are more complex. Now students will talk about some basic concepts or notions that are related to semiotics. And number one is iconicity. Signs can be generally classified as iconic or arbitrary. And when we talk about iconic signs, we can say that iconic signs are those whose forms mirror their meaning in some respect. And you can say signs with no natural analogical correspondence between their forms and meanings. Those signs are called arbitrary. It means there is no natural connection or there is no natural association between the sign and meaning in arbitrary signs. Okay, take a simple example by the Arabic and Roman numerals for word 3. We can say the Arabic form, it gives no clue to its meaning. And if we talk about the Roman version, or if we talk about the Roman transcript, on the other hand, we can say that it incorporates threeness into its shape. So we can say that the Roman version is thus its iconic. And iconicity, we can say it is a matter of degree that usually coexist with some degree of arbitrariness. Now, three horizontal lines would be just as iconic as the Roman 3. And the fact behind is this one, that in the Roman symbols the lines are vertical is arbitrary, as in the fact that its size because corresponds to that of letters. And students, iconicity enters language, you can say, in several possible ways. And the majority of the words in natural language, they are arbitrary. Okay, take one example, the form of word dog. We cannot say that the dog is mirroring its meaning in some respect or another, or the word dog. So we can say the so-called, all these words, they display a degree of iconicity in their sounds. And the predominance of arbitrariness in the vocabulary, it is not accidental feature. But students, it is, you can say it is the crucial design feature of the natural language. So arbitrariness, it is the characteristic or it is the design feature of human language. However, we can say there is a limited stock of dimensions of formal variation in linguistic science. If all signs were iconic, then it would be difficult to see or difficult to say how universal expressivity could be achieved. And sometimes we can say that iconicity it is also apparent in grammar. For instance, when we can say that when words which belong together tend to occur together. Okay, take one example. If I'm saying that the tall man kissed the young child, then we may know that the tall modifies the man and the young or the younger, it modifies the child. So we can say because tall and man come next to each other in this sentence. And in some languages, this relationship, it might be shown by grammatical agreements, we can say in a kind of resemblance. So we can say that therefore these are iconic. And there is another way in which this iconicity appears in the grammar. It is that grammatical complexity, and grammatical complexity by the, you can say by the large, it mirrors the semantic complexity as well. Students, now we will discuss conventionality. Many of the signs that are used in human communication, they are natural in the sense that they are part of a genetically inherited biological makeup. And one more thing, that they do not have to be learned. Although we can say that a maturational period may be necessary or it's required for them before they appear in an individual, or you can say they may be molded into various ways to fit in to a particular cultural styles. So the sort of signs which are natural in this way or in this sense, they will presumably include even facial expressions, we can say like smiling, frowning, or indications there may be other ones just like fear and surprise, and so on. And perhaps many of postural and proxemic signs can also be included that we may call body language. And certain signs like gesture, vocal expressions, or other indication of excitement or desire can be included in this one. Whereas natural signs are concerned, natural signs are likely to be the most, you can say, cross-culturally interpretable. And other signs, they have conventionally assigned meanings because they have to be specifically learned, and they are likely to differ in different communities. They are not same. Linguistic signs are just, we can say linguistic signs are the prototypical conventional signs. And even onomatopoeic words usually have a significant conventional element, often an iconic type of nature, can only be appreciated. Students, take the Turkish word bulbul. What does it refer to? Or it's a baby's babbling, or it's a noise of mountain. What is the meaning of the word bulbul? In fact, the meaning of this word, it means nightingale. So now if we look back into its connection, we can say it's not only the linguistic signs that are conventional. We can say other signs, obscene or offensive gesture, they can also vary remarkably cross-culturally. If we talk about the Europe, in Europe even the conventional signs or the gestures, they differ. Greeks, they are famously and slightly, you can say inaccurately, said to shake their heads to say yes. And when they have to say no, they nod their heads. Okay, now we talk about discreteness. Students, some signs can vary gradually regarding their form, and their meanings vary in parallel with the change of form. Like a fisherman's indication of the size of the one that got away. So these types of signs are called continuous signs, and other signs have fixed shapes, and they must be chosen from a limited inventory, or intermediate forms are not allowed, or the range of possibilities is chunked. And such signs are called or described as discrete. And if we talk about the linguistic signs, we can see linguistic signs are also virtually of discrete variety. And again, one thing more for you people, or for your information's sake, that it is not an accidental feature that linguistic signs are discrete, but in reality, it has a close connection. It has a close connection with iconicity and arbitrariness. And continuous signs are necessarily, we can say, continuous signs are iconic, and arbitrary signs are necessarily discrete. So you people have to remember that continuous signs, they are necessarily iconic, and arbitrary signs are necessarily discrete. Now we'll talk about language and other communicative channels. Students, the prototypical scenario for linguistic communication is, of course, two people, those who are engaged in a face-to-face communication or conversation. And of course, we can guess that in such type of encounter, obviously, language signals are exchanged. But normally, you can say there are so many other types of signals. And these other types of signals, they also modify, they also supplement, or you can say they also facilitate our linguistically encoded message. So now we'll discuss briefly the other semiotic environment of language, that is in a typical conversation that is there, and the signs that accompany language. Students, these signs can be divided into two major types or categories. Number one is called paralinguistic signs, and number two is called, you can say, non-linguistic. And the defining characteristic of paralinguistic signs, it can be, you can say, it can be taken as an extreme dependence on the accompanying language. We can say either they cannot be produced except during the speech. Paralinguistic signs, they are carried on the voice. So we can say they cannot be interpreted except in conjunction with accompanying language. And examples of, you can say, the paralinguistic signs, it can be the variety, you can say, or in voice, you can include the abnormal volume, tempo, pitch, or voice quality, because all these things function as signs. So there must be a departure from some personal baseline or norm. For instance, or for example, we can say if there is abnormally high pitch, or the tempo is very fast, or high volume, all these, you can say, typically signal a very heightened emotional state of a person. And if we talk about the examples of non-linguistics, then we can say that examples of second variety include pausing, emphatic gestures, and gestures with other, you can say, metaphorically depiction. For instance, we can say direction of motion. And students, one thing more here for you people, we can say that the functions of paralinguistic science, they can be even further classified under three headings as you people are looking at this slide. Number one is punctuation, number two is modulation, and number three is illustration. As far as punctuation is concerned, we can say that these are the signs which have functions that is parallel to those of, you can say, that is in punctuation in written language. So mainly to segment the stream of speech so as to facilitate the process of the whole process. And number two is modulation. Then what is modulation, or what is the function of modulation? We can say this involves the addition of an emotive or attitudinal coloring. So it is an emotive or attitudinal coloring to the linguistically encoded message. Now we'll talk about illustration. Students, some signs they depict a key element in the message. So we can say such as a direction of a movement or a shape. And the depiction may be, you can say, relatively literal, like the hand movements of someone describing the climbing of a spiral staircase, or metaphorical as when you can say vertical and parallel hands accompany the setting of limits of some kind. We cannot say that all the signs that occur outside the language are paralinguistic in some sense. For instance, one may smile or frown while speaking, and this may well modulate the message. At the same time, the smiles and the frowns, they are perfectly interpretable and capable of being produced in the absence of any accompanying language. So these are therefore, then all these will be considered non-linguistic. Okay, now we'll talk about the characteristic of linguistic science. Signs at different linguistic levels. We can say a linguistic sign, it may be no more than a phoneme or two phonemes, and this is one interpretation. Okay, take one example of SL sound. There are so many words like slimy, slug, slag, slum, which seems to indicate that something is unpleasant. Or okay, take one more example of GL sound. If I'm saying the words with GL sounds, glare, glimmer, glitter, or glisten, glow, gleam, etc. There are so many, and which all have something to do with the light effects. But these have no grammatical status, no contrastive value. But however, students, the intuitions of the native speakers leave no doubt that they should receive some recognition. And other signs, they occur at a higher level of linguistic organization. We can say from morpheme level. Okay, if I say dogs, the za sound, and then through the word level, for example, denationalization, then at clause level. So the formal difference between this sentence, if I'm saying John is here and is John here, now you people will get the signal that one is the question and the other one is the statement. Then we can talk about sentence level. For example, I'm saying we will do it as soon as you arrive. Instead of this one, or opposed to this one, as soon as you arrive, we will do it. And up to the next level, we can talk about the fact that a stretch of text constitutes a sonnet that is indicated by the form of the text as a whole. And this form therefore constitutes a high level sign. We can say the fact that a sign manifests itself a particular level, it does not entail that it is to be interpreted at a level. Okay, take one more example. The item the, a word, exerts its semantic effect on the whole noun phrase. If I'm saying the little old lady who lives in the cottage on the hill. Now this morpheme the, you can say, semantically situates the time that is relative to the moment of utterance, and it symbolizes the whole event as well. Now we will discuss various approaches to the study of meaning. Students, meaning, it can be studied as a part of various or several academic disciplines. Of course, we can say there is a significant degree, or there might be a significant degree of overlap between disciplines. But characteristically, all have something, you can say, unique in their approach. So first of all, we will discuss the discipline or approach of philosophy. Because typically linguists, they take the existence of meaning, that meaning is for granted, and we all accept it as an intuitively accessible natural kind. Linguists, they do not ask questions like how is it possible for anything to mean something, or what sort of relation must hold between X and Y for it to be the case that X means Y. Then what does it mean? All these types of questions, or you can say all such questions, they are tackled or they are under the province of philosophers, particularly the philosophers of language. Now we'll talk about psychology. Students, meaning is also a major concern of the psychology of language, or you can say psycholinguistics as well. A distinctive feature here is the experimental studies that have been conducted by the psychologists, that how meanings are represented in mind, and what are the mechanisms that are involved. What are the mechanisms that are involved in the whole process of encoding and decoding messages. An example of the fact that could only emerge within a psycholinguistics framework is that, student, is the lexical decision task. When all the experimental subjects, they observe string of letters flashed on a screen, and must indicate by pressing the appropriate button whether the string represents a word or not. Responses are faster to words. Which words? With the words with concrete meaning, than to the words with the abstract meaning. And even at that time, all extraneous factors like length and frequency, these are controlled. So we can say this observation, presumably, it provides a clue to the role of meaning in word recognition that is provided by the domain of psychology. The third approach is neurology. Students, we can say that psychologists, they take a macro view of the mental states and processes. Whereas when we talk about the neurologists, on the other hand, they want to know how these states and processes are implemented. If we talk about a psychologist, we can say a psychologist might be broadly compared with a computer programmer. And on the other hand, a neurologist, you can take a neurologist as a designer of the computer chip. And meaning, like everything else in the mental life, must boil down ultimately to connections between neurons. And as far as semiotics is concerned, the persons, those who belong to this discipline, they view language as one sign system, just like the other signs, and they try to seek out those features which render it so successful. You can say they are also likely to give emphasis on marginal aspects of linguistic signification, And the recent strong interest in iconicity in language, it also represents a significant overlap between the linguistic and semiotic approaches to meaning. And the last one that is here in this slide is linguistics. So linguistics is also used as an approach to study the meaning, just like semiotics or neurology and psychology. We have already talked about all these. Students, it's not easy to encapsulate the linguistic approach to meaning in language. There are perhaps three aspects you can say. The first one, you people have heard so many times, that is the native speakers' semantic intuitions. And native speaker semantic intuitions, they are at the center stage. They constitute the main source of the primary data. And the second thing in linguistics, it is the importance of relating meaning to the manifold surface forms of language. And the third aspect, the third is the respect paid not just to language but to languages. Now we'll discuss various branches of the study of meaning which are used in language. We can say there is lexical semantics, then grammatical semantics, logical semantics, and we can also talk about linguistic pragmatics. Students, first of all, I would like to discuss lexical semantics. That what is lexical semantics and what is the focus of lexical semantics. We can say lexical semantics studies the meaning of words. Now, which type of words or what is the focus? We can say the focus here is on content words. Like we can say tiger or daffodils or inconsiderate, rather than form or grammatical words. There are so many other grammatical words like the, of, then, so on, so on. But what is the focus of lexical semantics? The focus of lexical semantics is content words. We can say to a non-specialist, the notion of meaning, probably it has a stronger link with the idea of the word than with any other linguistic unit. Students, words are, we can say after all, what are listed in the dictionaries. And the main function of a dictionary is to tell us what the listed words mean. And due to this reason, or for this reason, we can say lexical semantics, it perhaps provides the easiest way or easiest access route if we want to discover the mysteries of semantics. The next category is grammatical semantics. Now it's apparent from the name that grammatical semantics, it studies the aspect of meaning. Which aspect of meaning? Students, those aspects of meaning which have a direct relevance with syntax or grammar. And it has many manifestations. But students, there are a few problems. One problem is the meaning of syntactic categories. It is problematic because not everyone believes that they can be considered or they can be assigned meaning. Okay, I would like to quote a few examples here. Okay, consider the differences in the meaning of yellow. Now listen carefully the examples. If I'm saying she wore a yellow hat, so the function or grammatical category of yellow is adjective here. Then they painted the room a glowing yellow. In this sentence, the yellow is noun. The leaves yellow rapidly once the frosts arrive. Now, yellow is verb here. And there are also other aspects of grammatical semantics. We can talk about the meaning that is in the grammatical morphemes. Okay, let's talk about the word walked, the ed in the walked. Then we can take another example of longer, er in longer. So these are the grammatical morphemes and they also have the meaning. We can say there is an overlap between lexical semantics and grammatical semantics. Partly because some grammatical elements are words like we can say the or of, but more particularly because some aspects of meanings of full lexical items determine to some degree their grammatical behavior. Okay, how? For instance, if I'm saying the fact that I'm studying that question is grammatical, but not I'm knowing the answer to that question also. Logical semantics. Logical semantics studies the relations between natural language and formal logical systems, such as we can say propositional or predicate notions. But there is some problem that is, you can say, arguable, that sometimes such studies they only shed more light on the formalism used than we can say on the language being modeled. And to date, most of such studies, they have only concentrated on the propositional level or sentence level. And they have rarely attempted to look into the meanings of words. The next category is linguistics, pragmatics. Students, pragmatics, it is a branch of linguistics, which is the study of language. And what is the focus of pragmatics? It focuses on the process in which the speaker implies and listener infers. Simply we can say pragmatic studies language that is not directly spoken. Instead, the speaker hints a meaning and listener assumes the correct meaning. And the role of context is also very important in pragmatics. So in today's session, we have talked about semantics and communication. That communication, it can be conceived very broadly. It is a very broad term that is related with the transfer of information between biological generations via the genetic code. And after that, we have discussed a simple model of communication that includes different things: encoding, channel, decoding, and transmitted signals. We have also discussed language. It is a system of signs, and it is a system of signs that includes complex signs and simple signs. We have already discussed the notion of iconicity, that signs they can be generally classified as icons or they are arbitrary. Then we have talked about conventionality, that many of the signs used by humans in communication, they are natural in the sense that they are a part of genetically inherited biological makeup and they do not have to be learned. We have already talked about discreteness, and then we have discussed some communicative channels. We have already talked about some approaches to the study of meaning, including philosophy, psychology, neurology, and semiotics. And we have talked about different branches of semantics, including lexical semantics, grammatical semantics, logical semantics, and linguistic pragmatics. And students, this is all about today's session. Thank you very much. Okay, at the end of this presentation, I would like to acknowledge the resources. The source material of this presentation has been taken from the book Meaning in Language, An Introduction to Semantics and Pragmatics, that is written by Cruz.